everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butch-Chester. You guys know what I like to do on my show. Say it with me. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's what we want to do today. We want to get you fired up about my guest. I'll be spending time with Rex Greenwald today, and we'll be talking about his book, One Lifetime is Not Enough. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do? Go on and get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Rex. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thank you, Dr. Angela.
Absolutely. So glad that you are here. Now, before we get started talking about your book, we have a bit of a tradition, and I always ask my authors to tell us a little bit about themselves. So my first question to you is, what makes you you?
What makes me me? My family, my love of the Lord Jesus Christ, my overall desire to live the Spirit within me and to live the will of God that He has put in me. And that's who I am. And that's what people know.
I love it. I love it. Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that this was just one of the best ways to share your story?
Well, since college, I've always wanted to write. I read a fair amount. Like most authors, we read because we get good information. We might see narratives we like. We might see characterizations we like. And over the years, I would highlight every book that I get my hands on. I would do several Bible studies. I would highlight. I've read the Bible from cover to cover several times, and I would highlight that as well. And all of a sudden, the Spirit of God came upon me a few years back to write what's inside me. And it took some time to figure out how to do it, because it wasn't just a story about me. No one wants to know about me. I'm just me, I'm just one of billions of people. But I wanted to write a story with good characters, a good, clean story that I would let my grandchildren read and be happy that they would read it. And that's why I wrote it. And it took some time, it took a lot of effort to write it. And
right.
I didn't mean, Dr. Angela, I did not mean it to be some kind of book about religion or anything like that, but I cannot write anything without it being who I am. This is who I am.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
It came out loud and clear.
Right. Now, the title of your book, One Lifetime is Not Enough. Why was that the proper title for this book?
Many years ago, I read a story, and I just picked a book. I went to Barnes & Noble and said, God, give me a book that you would like me to read. And it was a book about in the Mediterranean Sea on a ship, and the main character was Coy, and that's my main character. It's a 12-year-old boy in my book. In that book, it was an older man. And he was pondering, and he said, oh, man, with everything I'm going on in life, one lifetime is just not enough. And over the years after I read that, I started writing what that meant. If we're living within the Spirit of God, and we're living with the unconditional love that He gives us, then this life is not enough. I mean, all of us that live in that, we know that there's a life ahead of us with Jesus and with our loved ones. But if it isn't, if we are not living under that freedom of spirituality, then it's surely, you got to be going through life going, hey, this life isn't enough, man. There's got to be more. And I wanted to describe that in a very unique way, what that meant.
Right. I can definitely understand that. Now, when it comes to the proper age group for this book, many authors I know have a particular reader in mind when they're writing. Would you say that your book is appropriate for anyone high school age, or should they more be in the age of perhaps college or 30 and older? What's the best age group there?
I didn't write it for a particular age group, Dr. Angela. I wrote it as I wanted to explore the mind of a little 12-year-old boy. Of course, he's a pretty bright little 12-year-old boy. But in that, I also had an older man in there, and they became they became bonded by the love of the Lord, and they found God together within the story in a unique way. And it's funny, I did a book signing in Los Angeles a few months back, and there's every kind of book that you can imagine at those book fairs, and I'm sure you've been to them also, Doctor. And then a mother came up to and I signed the book for her, and she says, I'm signing this for my teenage boy because this is the kind of book I would like him to read, because there's no swearing, there's no magic, there's no nothing like that. It's just a nice story about a young man who is exploring and wondering and trying to figure out life, and in that he's learning about life from the people around him. And he lives with a very special passion. And his passion is, do not judge people, do not judge other people by outward appearances.
Right.
Judge them by their heart. That's what God wants us to do.
All
and
the
every
time.
single character in my book there's obstacles that every one of them. The one little girl, her daddy had died. The grandfather had a lost arm. There was different nationalities of people, and everybody felt, and as you know, in this world, we get hindered by some obstacles, and I wanted those
to touch on that. Absolutely. Now, I'm trying to cut you off, but I want to ask you, when it comes to how to properly read your book, many times an author will set it up so that it's done in chapters or sections, so that we know to read chapter 1 before moving on to chapter 2, that we need that basis information before moving on. Others have written in a way where each chapter is somewhat independent of itself. You can kind of open the book and start wherever the reader would like. Is there a best way to read your book? Should we read it cover to cover, starting with page 1 to page last, or can we, reader's choice, open it up and start reading anywhere?
I personally believe you can read it anywhere. There's 44 chapters, and I intentionally did it in shorter chapters, because when I read, let's say I decide to read a little bit at night, I don't want to read a 40-page chapter. I want to read a 3 to 5 page chapter that has a story and a narrative in itself. Each chapter has a story in itself. I will tell you, and I will tell the people listening, that what inspired me in this writing was chapter 3. I wrote chapter 3 over 10 years ago, and I hammered it, and I worked it, and I worked it, and I realized I probably flunked 8th grade English after I wrote it, though, so it took me a while. And then I built the entire story around that. I put the pinnacle of my story early on in the book, and then I flash back in time, both forward and back, on how we get to that point. And then I climax at the end where there's an epiphany.
So my next question for you, Rex, is can you tell us a little bit about the main character of your book? One lifetime is not enough. Who's the main character?
The main character is Coy. He's a 12-year-old boy that is coming of age, and he's trying to figure out who Jesus is, who God is, and he's learning it within an environment where he's talking to other characters. There's another primary main character who is the older man, who's like 60 years old, and then they bond together. In all reality, I'm both. I'm that 12-year-old boy, and I'm that older man, and I'm finding God together again. And that's what it's all about.
Oh, I like that, because you're right. Anyone who has lived a few years on this beautiful earth of ours, we are different people at different phases and stages of our lives, but who we are with God and who God is with us also changes along that time period as well. So, I like how you've interwoven that piece of who we are as human beings in there. I like it. Now, when it comes to your inspiration, and you kind of hinted on that a little bit before, but I wanted to give you a little more time here. Many of the authors that I talk to say that they have an inspiration, a nudging, a prompting, if you will, when it comes to their writings. Did you find that there was any prompting, nudging? Tell us about that. What made you say, now is the time?
Well, it seemed like everywhere I was, I don't care if I was at church listening to a message, I was at a ball game with my kids, coaching, I was whatever, there was always something in my mind. Or if I was around people, I was constantly taking notes. Every book I read, I would then sit down and take a journal and write down stuff. And eventually God in my mind, through the Spirit, said to me, you know what, maybe you should write something. And I sat down, and it is hard work. Anybody who's written a book, it's intense, and you think that you're going to just rattle it off, but there's sometimes that you might be able to write a paragraph and it's great or whatever, but then there's other times you can't even get a sentence out. And there's other times where your biorhythms seem to be great and you can put, 4, 5, 6 pages. And, next thing I know, after hard work, I had 80,000 words and 44 chapters and a story. And that's why I did it. I mean, it was just a prompting within me.
And I find that the majority of the authors that I've spoken with, they too say that there's just kind of an understanding, a knowing that now is the time. And it's like, okay, I got it. This is kind of a God moment here. I need to do this, and I won't feel like this is over with until I've done my part. And we can move on to whatever that next step is. So I like that. That is a aha moment for somebody out there. Confirmation for them that they are feeling the same thing as well. Now, as far as what to expect or what your readers should expect while they are reading this story, this journey of these two characters, Will they be able to see themselves, do you think, within the story?
Oh, man. I've had a lot of marketing, and I've had several interviews, and it's funny that it didn't matter if a man or woman or age, they would come up with a different part of the story that meant something to them. And so that tells me that there's a lot of nuance within the story, and it's me, but it's a little girl, it's older people, it's younger people, it's the environment that the story's in that people might connect to. It's got a lot of depth, and there's a lot of little mysteries in there. After I read the book, once I received the book when it was bound, I reread it as if I was just someone wanting to read a book, and I realized it was a book that I would want to read because it's clean, it's fun, there's a little mystery, there's little things in the story, and I found little secret messages that I was telling myself as a writer that came into the story later that I like when I read, and I didn't even know I did it until I read it later. I'm like, wow. And it was another one of those things that just kind of happened. So I think that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I think that it's, to me, I kind of chuckled there because even though you wrote the story, when you got a chance to go back and reread it, it was even something fun and exciting for you because you didn't realize that you had kind of wrapped that into the storyline. So it also became fun for you to read or reread the drafts that you put out there for that finished product. So I think that's awesome. Well, Rex, it is time for us to get ready to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, thank you, Dr. Angela. The title of the book is One Lifetime Is Not Enough. And my name is Rex Nelson Greenwald. And my website is authorrngreenwald.com. I do have a Facebook page. You would have to just search for Rex Nelson Greenwald, and you can get to my Facebook page.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Rex Nelson Greenwald, and we're talking about his book, One Lifetime Is Not Enough. So my next question for you, Rex, is with the majority of the authors that I've spoken with, there have been bits and pieces of the book that while they were writing, they have either really enjoyed writing that section or that chapter. Or there may have even been some bits and pieces that were difficult to write, be it because they were trying to protect another person, or they were discussing a personal trauma, or simply because they were trying to really create an amazing book and they had to slow down and really develop the character. Did you have any bits or pieces that were really intriguing for you, that were really exciting or difficult to write when you were in that stage of the book?
Every chapter I wrote where there's a larger narrative and there's other characters, I brought myself to tears several times while I was writing, because I really dug deep into my heart and what God has put in my heart. In particular, on chapter 32, I write a little story about a little boy and a little girl on the end of the dock talking about life. And in essence, I was talking to my wife. That little girl is my wife now. And I've been married almost 40 years. I love her. God chose her for me. And on that dock scene, when I wrote that scene, it just was so special to me when I finished that chapter, and it meant a lot to me. And if I never have a chance to tell my wife I love her, I told her there how much I loved her from the first day I saw her until forever, throughout eternity.
Oh, that is so sweet. I love that. I love that. You know, I love how we as human beings are able to grow and evolve into the best version of ourselves, that when we start to acknowledge that certain things really and truly have been blessed by God. And the fact that you said, you know, my wife was chosen for me by God. I think that's awesome, because you know that with that you can love this person, nurture this person, you know, really share your heart with her, and that she will love you back equally. And I think that is so beautiful. So thank you for sharing that tidbit with us today. That's awesome. Now, there may be some folks out there that are aspiring authors, and one of the things that we try to do is ask some questions on their behalf. There's a few questions that I try to ask of all of my authors so that those aspiring kind of have a level playing field, like everyone gets asked a certain question, so it's a guide or a gauge for them. With that being said, I want to pick your brain just a little bit about this book, but about how you made the choices that you made. So when it came time to write, no matter where you were in the book, be it that it was beginning stages or towards the end, did you find that there was a particular time of day or a particular day that you were most productive? I know many writers will say, you know, at the end of the day or first thing in the morning before the world wakes up. Did any of that matter for you?
It did. There's times during the day where I just feel my biorhythms really strong. I might be in my vehicle, even just driving, and all of a sudden I know every word to the song on the radio, and I'm just praising God or whatever, and I'm like, wow, I need to write like right now. You know, and then there's other times where you're writing and you just know you want to get something out. You can't relax. Your mind won't shut down until you get it down. No matter what, write it down. It might not be perfect, but it's exactly what God wants you to write at that particular time. You can go back and rewrite it and reword it and, you know, use your thesaurus, use your whatever, and get it the way you know, hone it in, and, you know, the rough edges, sharpen it later. But when I had got to the point where I couldn't shut my mind off because there was something there, that's when I wrote. And it could have been at night, it could have been in the morning, it could have been in the middle of the night. There was times that I was maybe just sitting in a parking lot and I hand wrote you know, 4 or 5 sentences or a couple paragraphs, and very poorly. You know, I couldn't even read them hardly, but I had to get it down.
Right.
And then I put it all together into
I think you're onto something there. Absolutely, you're onto something because I know as entrepreneurs, solopreneurs out there in the world, we are exactly the same way. We know to keep our handy dandy notebook, in our bedside table because you're right. In the wee hours of the morning, when a great idea comes, you have to write that down. Then, to me, one of the best things that we can do is have that journal, a notepad, even if we have to send a text to ourselves, whatever it is, or an email to ourselves, we need to make sure that that we're doing that. That notepad app is there for a reason. Make note of it so that you don't lose it. I can agree with you more there. Now, every author
You have
has
to be
to
real
decide.
honest with yourself too.
Absolutely,
I'm sorry. You
absolutely.
have to be just so honest with yourself. You write something down that at the
Right,
time seems very pertinent, and then later, after rehashing
right,
it, you have to be, you can't lie to
right.
God.
Absolutely, you
Okay, so you
absolutely cannot.
have to be honest
Right,
and take that
right,
honesty
right.
and
Now,
move and keep pushing forward and moving forward.
when it comes to deciding on how to publish your book, every author has to decide, am I going to self-publish the book or am I going to hire professionals that can pitch the book to the big boys? Or am I going to use professional services and that you pay for the things that you want to happen and you make sure they happen properly? How did you decide which way you were going to publish your book?
I didn't really decide because I wasn't even planning on publishing. I was just writing. So once I finished it, I realized that I'm just Rex. Okay, I'm not anybody famous. No one's going to sign me up to write books or whatever. Not yet. They might in the future because I think I wrote a really good book. And so I self-published, and since then I've had a tremendous amount of contact with people, and I'm learning a little bit about this industry. This is as tough an industry as anything else. To get to the publishing level, I'll get there. I'm patient. It'll happen when God wants it to happen. This is a great. I'm lucky, blessed that I was able to finish this book. It took a lot of perseverance, and it's going to happen. So I think the best avenue for me was to try to self-publish it and expose the world to me that way. And I have 2 other books that are almost ready to publish, and we'll see what happens. Maybe a publisher will help me next time, and if it does, it's great. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Now, when you were done with the entire process and you are now taking book number 1 out of the shipping material, right? You're holding book number 1 in your hands. How did you feel in that moment?
It's pretty exciting, isn't it? I'm sure you've had those moments. It was like, really? Wow, and the cover is great, the bio is great. And I was just like, really? Gosh, I can't even imagine starting a project thinking that that's the final thing. I don't think anybody can write and say it's going to be 300 pages, and it's going to be this long, it's going to look this way, it's going to be this font, it's going to be whatever. You just have to go with the flow a little bit. And then when it's all done and you're actually holding the book, you're going, if I do nothing else, I know that my wife, my son, my daughter, my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law, and my 6 grandchildren will have something that they can read, and they will know who their dad was, who their husband was, and who their grandfather was in the future. And that's very satisfying for me. Even if it was never published, even if no one reads it, Dr. Angelo, I know that the people that love me and that I love very dearly in my life, it's for them. And
absolutely. But we know people are going to read your book, so it's available out there. Folks are definitely going to pick up a copy of the book, so we know that is going to happen.
People. God bless. No. God bless people who put themselves out there and write. I mean,
absolutely. Now let me ask you this question. When you were in the process of writing, every author has to stay inspired in order to write. Not what was your inspiration for writing, but what kept you inspired in those moments where perhaps the ideas weren't flowing as freely as before, or it was simply a day or a time to write? How did you keep yourself inspired?
When I didn't feel like writing, I would read other people, other books for inspiration. It's just like, when you feel down about something in life, the best way to get out of that is go help someone else. And then your worries go away because we're helping someone else get through a certain thing, and that's kind of what I did as a writer. When I didn't feel like it or I couldn't get anything down, I would let someone else help me. A lot of times it was the Bible, I will tell you that, but other times it might have been, C.S. Lewis, or it could have been Steinbeck, it could have been whoever. That I picked up that book that I had read before, and I started looking at my highlighted things and my notes, and I'm like, oh, that's an idea that I could go with, and that's how I did it.
I love it. I love it. Now, my last question for you is, if you could give a piece of advice to our aspiring authors out there, what would that piece of advice be?
I'd say expect greatness. Don't put any hindrances on who you are. Think of the abundance of life that God has given us. If we're on this side of heaven, there's a reason we're on this side of heaven. Okay? Go for it. There's no reason not to go for it. Write your heart out. Write your heart out, and people will come. And that's what's happening to me. And it's just exciting to see. And it's not. It feels good. Don't get me wrong, but when good things happen to us as individuals, yeah, we're supposed to feel good and all that. But it's in God's hands, not my hands. If He could take me tomorrow. I'm healthy. I have a great family around me. I have a good business going, and then I wrote this book, and so I just recommend that to people. Lead a life of love, abundance. Don't judge other people. Just look at the hearts of others, and don't look at outward appearance. I don't care if you're man, woman, whatever you are. Everyone is made in God's image. We have to look at people that way, and when you do that, life is a joy.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. Well, Rex Nelson Greenwald, thank you so much for spending some time with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I have enjoyed my time with you today, and thank you so much for sharing this truly inspired story. Now, before I let you go, one last time, if you could you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
The title of the book is One Lifetime Is Not Enough. It's sold on Amazon or where books are sold.
Righty, everyone. Now you know where to get a copy of the book. And Rex, thank you again for being a guest here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for being here today as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend the day with us, and I thank you for doing so. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.